In the Middle Ages, winter did not need storms to kill travelers. Snow alone was enough. When winter came, roads disappeared, landmarks vanished, and familiar routes turned into featureless white fields. A traveler did not need to be reckless to die. He only needed to choose the wrong path once. What made winter journeys truly dangerous was not the cold itself, but how deceptive the landscape became. Snow created routes that looked smooth, simple, and safe, the kind of path a tired person would follow without hesitation. Yet those were often the paths that led nowhere, or worse, led straight into frozen marshes, thin river ice, or open land with no shelter in sight. Medieval travelers had no reliable maps, no road signs, and no way to call for help. If you misread the terrain, there was no second chance. Merchants carrying goods between towns vanished without a trace. Messengers never delivered their letters. Pilgrims simply failed to arrive. Entire journeys ended silently, leaving behind nothing but footprints that the next snowfall erased. But not everyone was helpless. Those who survived winter travel understood something modern travelers rarely consider. They did not trust the path that looked easiest. They trusted the signs hidden in the snow itself. Snow was not an obstacle to them. It was information, and knowing how to read it meant the difference between reaching shelter before nightfall or becoming part of the winter landscape forever. To understand why reading snow was a matter of survival, one must first reimagine the real conditions of winter travel in the Middle Ages. When snow fell, the familiar world disappeared. Roads formed by wagon ruts, footprints, and wooden markers no longer existed. The boundaries between paths, fields, marshes, and frozen rivers were erased. Everything became a flat, cold, white surface where direction was no longer clear and mistakes had no chance to be corrected. Not everyone could choose to stay put and wait for winter to pass. Merchants had to keep moving to maintain contracts and livelihoods. Messengers were forced onto the road because the orders of a lord could not be delayed. Monks traveled between monasteries. Villagers searched for food. Refugees sought shelter. Winter did not stop the world. It only made every journey far more dangerous. In that context, travel was no longer a matter of convenience or inconvenience, but a decision of survival. Death on winter journeys rarely came suddenly. It arrived slowly and quietly. A lost traveler did not collapse at once. He merely walked a little more slowly, rested a little longer, and felt tired earlier than usual. The body gradually lost heat, thoughts grew dull, and poor decisions began to appear. Stopping for too long or taking a wrong turn that seemed harmless was enough for a journey to end within hours, leaving no trace behind. Under those conditions, snow was no longer merely weather. It became a layer that covered every familiar human sign. But at the same time, it also recorded new traces. Medieval people gradually understood that if they could no longer trust the old roads, they had to learn to trust what the snow revealed in the present. Snow preserved footprints, reflected the wind, exposed the terrain, and hinted at where life had once passed. The problem was not what snow concealed, but whether the traveler knew how to observe it. Over time, experience accumulated across generations. Those who survived passed on to others simple but unforgiving principles. An easy path was not necessarily a safe one. A flat surface was not necessarily stable ground. A route that appeared clean and untouched could mean that no one had ever survived crossing it. Meanwhile, small signs that seemed insignificant often carried life or death importance. Experienced travelers did not search for a perfect path. They searched for irregularities. A slight collapse in the snow could reveal soft ground beneath. An area where snow melted early might indicate flowing water below the surface. A place marked by repeated animal tracks was often safer than a stretch of untouched snow. Every detail mattered if one knew how to ask the right questions. What mattered was that this knowledge was rarely written down. It did not exist in books or official maps. It was learned through observation, mistakes, and sometimes through the deaths of others. A skilled guide was not someone who knew many place names, but someone who understood how winter transformed the landscape. They knew that snow did not lie, but it also did not explain itself. The traveler had to learn how to read it. For this reason, every winter journey in the Middle Ages was not merely a passage across distance, but a test of adaptability. Those who survived were not always stronger or faster, but those who understood that snow always left signs, just not for those in a hurry. And from this foundation, more refined skills of reading snow began to take shape, drawing a clear line between those who returned and those who never arrived. When entering snow-covered wilderness, the first mistake many people made was trusting the footprints left by those who came before them. In common thinking, if someone had already passed through, the route must have been safe. But for those who had survived many winters, footprints were more a warning than a guarantee. They observed the depth of the impressions, the distance between steps, and the rhythm of the stride. Footprints set too close together suggested exhaustion. Deep impressions indicated soft snow or weak ground beneath. Footprints that suddenly disappeared were often not the result of a change in direction, but because the traveler could go no farther. Following the wrong footprints was not learning from experience, but repeating an outcome that had never been recorded in time. Yet even when the trap of footprints was avoided, the next danger lay in the very shape of the snow itself. Winter wind did not only bring cold, it sculpted the surface. Bands of wind-packed snow looked exactly like natural paths, flat, smooth, and easy to follow. In reality, they were often thin layers of snow covering unstable ice or dangerous depressions. Experienced travelers did not step onto these bands immediately. They studied the edges of the snow, searching for signs of sharp cuts or piled drifts, because wind always left marks of its own. A path shaped by wind could carry a traveler forward quickly, but it could also lead straight into a place with no return. The next critical danger came from areas of snow that were completely empty. A clean white surface, without tracks, broken branches, or animal droppings, appeared at first glance to be safe and controllable. Yet it was precisely this silence that made experienced travelers most wary. A place without signs of life often meant no shelter, no safe water source, and no chance of rescue. To enter a dead stretch of snow was to accept that if something went wrong, there would be nothing and no one to help. Medieval people understood that life always left traces, no matter how small. For this reason, they began to look to animals as an indirect guide. Wild animals did not read maps, but they knew how to avoid danger. Repeated paths made by deer, foxes, or rabbits often followed stable ground and stayed clear of thin ice. However, this too was a double-edged blade. Following animal tracks could help a traveler avoid hazardous areas, but it could also draw them deep into dense forest, far from villages and trade routes. Survivors did not blindly trust animal trails. They used them only to eliminate risks, not to determine the entire route. When the sun appeared, another danger emerged. Snow reflected light so intensely that it dulled perception. Inexperienced travelers were easily deceived by the temporary sense of warmth and by the direction of the glare. Those with experience, however, studied shadows cast on the snow. Unnaturally long shadows could indicate uneven ground. Areas where snow melted early often signaled underground water or proximity to forested land. Light did not merely make things more visible. It exposed distortions that the naked eye easily overlooked. Tension increased as the day wore on. Every decision at this stage carried irreversible consequences. Pressing forward in fading light could cause a traveler to lose direction. Stopping too early meant spending the night exposed to the cold. Medieval people knew that late afternoon was the most dangerous moment of a winter journey. At that hour, snow concealed the body's exhaustion and led travelers to misjudge their own limits. At this point, there was no room for emotional decisions. The survivor was the one who continually reread the snow, tested their assumptions, and was willing to abandon a path no matter how convenient it appeared. Each climax did not end danger, but revealed another, more subtle layer of it, and only those who understood that winter did not test strength, but the ability to observe, had any chance of moving forward. The greatest difference between those who survived and those who vanished during medieval winter journeys did not lie in endurance, nor in travel experience. It lay in something entirely opposite to common intuition. Survivors did not search for the correct path. They searched for signs that a path might be wrong. To them, the more perfect the snow appeared, the greater the danger it represented. A flat, even, unmarked surface of snow was not an invitation, but a warning. This was the fundamental reversal in medieval survival thinking. Instead of trusting clarity, they trusted irregularity. A slightly disturbed patch of snow could matter more than a wide, obvious route. A small, dirty mark could be more valuable than a pristine, white surface. Life, however fragile, always made snow imperfect. And where snow was broken, the ground was often safer than where it remained untouched. Medieval people understood that snow was not created to guide humans. It was shaped by wind, temperature, and terrain. Therefore, wherever snow failed to follow its natural patterns, there had been interference from life. It might be human, it might be animal, or at the very least, ground stable enough to bear weight. This deviation became the most reliable guide of all. What is striking is that these skills were rarely taught formally. They did not appear in monastic curricula, nor were they written down as manuals. They were passed on orally among those who were forced to travel in winter, seasoned merchants, guides, or families living along forest edges and wilderness frontiers. Those who learned survived. Those who did not simply disappeared without leaving a story behind. As roads were paved, as markers and maps gradually appeared, these skills began to be seen as unnecessary. People slowly came to believe that tools could replace observation. But what medieval travelers understood with absolute clarity was that the environment did not care about human plans. Snow was not malicious, but it was not helpful either. It merely reflected reality with indifference and absolute precision. The twist of this story is not that medieval people were smarter, but that they accepted an uncomfortable truth. Safety was never found on the easiest path, and in winter, What saved lives was not belief, but doubt applied in the right place. Medieval people were not reckless for entering winter because they were braver than we are. They stepped into it because they had no other choice, and it was precisely those circumstances that forced them to develop a way of seeing the world that we rarely use today. They learned to observe rather than trust. They learned to doubt rather than rely. And most importantly, they understood that the environment always sends signals, whether humans choose to notice them or not. The story of reading snow is not merely an ancient survival skill. It reflects a broader principle in how humans adapt to a harsh world. The survivor is not the one who tries to control nature, but the one who learns how to listen to it. Snow does not guide, does not warn, and does not care, but it always reflects the truth of terrain, temperature, and life. Medieval people understood that their task was not to force snow to show the way, but to learn how to decode what it revealed unintentionally. In the modern world, we are accustomed to digital maps, step-by-step directions, and tools that are always ready to correct mistakes. When we make an error, we usually have a chance to try again. But this also causes us to forget an important skill, the ability to actively observe our surroundings. Those who came before lived in a world with no room for complacency. Every decision carried clear and irreversible consequences. For that reason, they were forced to slow down, look more carefully, and question anything that appeared too easy. The lesson from medieval winter journeys does not lie in whether we should walk through snow or abandon technology. It lies in a way of thinking. The safest path is not always the clearest one. The correct solution is not always the most familiar one. Sometimes what keeps people safe is the ability to recognize that what looks perfect may be concealing the greatest risk. Snow still falls, as it always has. The wind still blows, and the terrain has not changed. Only humans have changed. And if there is one thing medieval people can still teach us, it is this. Survival does not begin with finding answers, but with learning how to ask the right questions of the environment around us. If stories like this help you see history in a different way, where the past is not just a series of events, but lived experience, consider subscribing to the channel. Each video is a different journey, exploring how people once survived, adapted, and learned under the harshest conditions through observation and intelligence alone. Thank you for taking the time to walk alongside this story. We'll see you again on the journeys ahead, where history is not only told, but understood more deeply.